Then, one day in the office, Kirsty had a big announcement.
I think we were excited that Kirsty was getting married. There was only a couple of women that worked in the business, so obviously girls being girls, we were probably more interested than the rest of the guys were. She was always looking out for the latest this, the latest that. She was excited about all of it. She was excited about the venue, researching things that would make her the most beautiful bride.
In January 2011, Kirsty's colleagues were invited to her lavish wedding reception, and no expense was to be spared. It was a day none of them would forget.
Very impressive venue. Beautiful, actually.
It was stunning. The harpsichordist was playing, the bar was on.
There was a face painter for the kids, there was a table magician.
It was as though someone had picked up a wedding catalogue and said, I'll have one of everything.
It was lavish, to say the least.
From recollection, the gifts of the bridesmaids included Ugg boots that matched their dresses, for some reason, and there were jewel-encrusted iPad cases.
It was a big event. There was a lot of people there. There'd been a lot of drinking, there was a lot of music, a lot of dancing. Everyone was in a happy mood.
But no one could quite believe how account supervisor Kirsty had managed to afford a wedding fit for a celebrity.
I think a number of us, myself included, had commented to Kirsty that, jokingly, that we were going back to check the accounts. Kirsty just laughed and shrugged it off, yeah.
The village of Brierley in South Yorkshire. Quiet, peaceful, serene. That was until a shameless act of fraud took the local town council to the brink of bankruptcy, leaving £1 million debt, costing local people their jobs, and leaving the community in ruins. Back in 2006, the local parish council began looking for a new clerk to help with bookkeeping. Mild-mannered Janet Cooper seemed like an ideal candidate.
Janet Cooper, I first met her when she worked in the Regen office. The next thing I knew, she was employed as a town council clerk.
But although Janet was only the bookkeeper, she was soon behaving like the boss.
This building here is where the parish council meet. This is where all the decisions are made. All the councillors used to sit round, but Janet took over. They all sat there, and they were like nodding donkeys, actually. I used to say they were nodding donkeys because everything she said, they agreed. And I thought, God, it's the Jan Cooper hour, this. It's not a council run. It was run by Jan Cooper. At council meetings, she seemed to appear to want to be in control of things. She had a lot of the answers to people's questions, and she seemed to know the council business in and out.
It seemed to a certain extent that she was running or making decisions for the council.
And because she was doing such a good job, they were all prepared to sit there and support her.
Janet was bringing in hundreds of thousands of pounds in additional funds to the council, claiming she'd secured government grants. It was boom time for the village of Brierley.
She got funding for a minibus, which we called the Brierley Buzzer. Then she came up with putting on fun days, and she put on a dog show, she put on a Christmas fair, she even got Grandpa Band to appear there. She was the best thing since sliced bread.
It wasn't just Brierley Town Council that was suddenly flush with cash. Janet Cooper was living the high life too.
She allegedly paid for a cruise holiday for a friend.
She booked a box at West Elm, out of her own pocket.
She went on holiday in Cornwall, I do know that. She was looking to buy a bungalow at about £400,000. She took all the staff to the local dog race meeting.
Volvo car.
And she got a lot to do with dog breeding.
What people didn't know was that Janet was creaming a fortune from the council's accounts, but an unexpected twist of fate was about to derail her dodgy dealings. Coming up, the ruthless accountant that ran a 25-year-old business into the ground.
There was something amiss here, and he said, and I think possibly he's up to something.
And Peter Sutton uncovers a shocking revelation about his account supervisor, Kirsty Lane.
I was nervously shaking. I think my face just turned grey.
"7 years ago, Essex entrepreneur Tony Allery owned a company worth almost £5 million. Today, he makes ends meet working as a labourer. the victim of a cold, calculated fraud. The dodgy dealings of a scheming accountant cost Tony his business, his fortune, and his future dreams for retirement.
I've worked from a very young age. I think I started work at about 12, and I have worked hard, and I haven't stopped. So my idea was to retire at 50, which is in about 3 months' time, which ain't gonna happen now.
Tony first set up his car transportation business over 2 decades ago.
I built a company up over years by just sheer hard work, never turned anything down, and that just led to people giving me more and more work. At its height, there was about 55 staff employed.
What Tony did, in a nutshell, he took me and gave me a chance. It was an adventure, but it's the best job I ever had.
I wasn't full-time. A lot of the work I'd done from home. We had a good income from it, but we didn't lead a lavish lifestyle. He just felt that, it was our retirement, and so, everything just went back into the company.
By 2006, Tony's business was booming. To help support the growing company, he hired a new accountant, a man named Stephen Ralph.
He seemed to be the best qualified, and he was the best candidate in a lot. He looked a bit meek, mild, a bit geeky. So I thought, he might be okay.
He was quiet, but he seemed okay.
But not everyone was so sure about the new accountant.
I didn't particularly take to him at all. I had an old dog at the time, an old rescue lab that I had, and the dog didn't particularly take to him either, which tells me a lot sometimes, because he was a very laid-back, lovely old dog,
He did sort of keep himself to himself. If we had a Christmas party or someone had a party, they'd invite him and he'd never turn up. So he was seemed to be a little bit of a loner.
Stephen Ralph had been working for the company for 8 months when Tony started having concerns.
His desk was like a paper mountain, and it sort of made me think that he wasn't that organised, and being unorganised in the job that he was doing was not a good thing. Someone did actually tell me that they'd known him prior to the company where he'd come from, and the hearsay, which is all it is that they believed that he was the downfall of the company.
Tony said something is not right. There is something amiss here. And he said, and I think possibly he's up to something.
Accounts supervisor Kirsty Lane had invited her workmates to her wedding reception. Her colleagues were amazed by the lavish and extravagant occasion.
Well, the story that she'd given us, or she'd certainly given me, was that her mum had recently been made redundant, and she had quite a big redundancy payout, and she was helping her a lot and paying for the wedding with some of that money. My wife said to Kirsty's mum that it was a fantastic do, and how lucky Kirsty was to have a mum that would provide such a fantastic wedding. And Kirsty's mum seemed a little bit surprised by the comment, and said that Kirsty and Graham were paying for it all themselves.
Kirsty Lane went off on honeymoon. But back at the office, Managing Director Peter Sutton received an unusual phone call.
Monday, back at work after the wedding, a phone call comes in from one of our suppliers, chasing a payment. Had a look on the bank and it all looked normal, and the only thing I could think was that there may be an issue with the sort code and account number, because everything else had stacked up. It was only at that point that then I began to look back at who else had that sort code and account number to see whether there'd been a mistake. Then I found that it was going to Kirsty's account. To confirm, I wasn't making a mistake, I went and had a look at some other transactions that had been processed in the days prior to this, and to my surprise, a number of transactions had been made to Kirsty. I think my face just turned grey. I was nervously shaking. I found a number of things that didn't stack up, and I'd been through as far as I could on the bank accounts and discovered at that stage I had discrepancies of probably £15,000-20,000 stretching back over the last 6 months. I was very shocked. My feelings to Kirsty at this stage were revulsion, betrayal. How could somebody do this to us? To constantly abuse that financial and that position of trust, it makes you question everybody else around you.
The game was up. Kirsty was immediately suspended, and Peter went straight to the police. No contact was to be made with her while they investigated.
Having sat down with the police, we went through the evidence that we had at that stage. They were obviously sympathetic, but to move this on, they then needed to move this over to a detective who could take it further and actually physically sit down and look at everything involved in the case.
Kirsty was arrested. A new office manager, Corinne Abram, was hired to help with the investigation into Kirsty's fraud.
We were looking for duplications of invoices, any differences in the amounts entered onto the system, and this was the main findings. This is how we did actually find a lot of the monies, like that one. Right, so say for instance, there was an invoice here, and it was, say, £1,068. Further down, say we were coming down, it might be £2,068, and then that would be paid off later into her own account. And there were big figures. We were looking at big figures, and on a daily occurrence, things were being highlighted.
There was something like 122 different transactions, totaling a somewhere in the region of £230,000, £240,000.
Just months before Kirsty's wedding, Peter had been forced to make some tough decisions about the business. Suddenly, everything clicked into place.
When you looked back at the trail of the transactions, and Kirsty had taken out over the preceding 3 months another £30,000, £40,000, that absolutely was one of the reasons why we had to make people redundant.
One Friday, Peter called me into the boardroom for a chat and told me that he had to let me go. I was really disappointed that a bit of made redundant. It was a real blow, a real blow.
At the time, the cash flow problems that we had, we purely believed down to just being the fluctuation of business with our clients.
Kirsty's theft of nearly £250,000 was a crushing blow. A shell-shocked Peter was weighing up the future of the business.
10 years ago when we started, we had nothing. 6 years, 7 years down the line when we discovered this kind of fraud, we didn't want to go back to nothing again. After all the effort and all the things we'd foregone to get to this point, for it all to go and disappear would have been the worst thing ever.
In Brierley, council bookkeeper Janet Cooper was busy living the high life by pocketing public cash. She'd managed to nick almost £300,000. But an unfortunate turn of events was about to put a stop to her scandalous swindle.
Janet first told us that she was having treatment for a brain tumour, and we didn't believe her. We honestly didn't believe her. We thought she was covering up for something. But unfortunately, it did turn out she did have a brain tumour.
When Janet went on leave for surgery, a replacement financial officer was brought in to look after the accounts, and immediately discovered that something was seriously amiss.
Brierley and Grimethorpe Town Council had contacted the police to look into potential strange activity within the bank accounts. They weren't exactly sure if there'd been any fraud.
It seemed as if a number of checks had been covered by invoices. Those invoices appeared to be fake or bogus, and when further investigations were made, it seemed that the checks had been paid directly into Mrs. Cooper's bank accounts.
Janet Cooper was about to receive a surprise call from the police, but she had a few surprises of her own in store.
It was on the 30th of July 2010. Myself and Stuart and other colleagues went down to Janet's house in Sheffield. Janet's husband answered the door, if I remember rightly. We asked if we could go in. He invited us in. She was sat in the lounge. She was quite calm.
She had a stick. She told us she couldn't see.
She said that she didn't know why we were there, and at that point claimed to have no knowledge of what had been going on.
Janet's behaviour was somewhat strange, somewhat erratic. She was led from one piece of furniture to the next, and she had to tell us where to find various things because she was unable to show us directly.
The drawers, cupboards, under the bed, anywhere that any paper could be hidden, that's where we looked.
It seemed very convenient that Mrs. Cooper seemed to be blind and seemed to have complete memory loss and had no recollections whatsoever of even of hearing of Brierley Town Council. It just seemed too convenient to be true.
We took paperwork related to properties that they were proposing to buy. There was quite a lot of information from estate agents. We took mobile phones from the house. We took computers from the house that we would end up looking through to see if there was anything that would assist the investigation on there as well.
The news of Janet's arrest spread like wildfire through the village of Brierley.
I was at home and I picked up the local weekly paper. Headlines were, 2 arrested over Brierley Town Council fraud.
I've got to confess that I weren't too surprised.
Back at the station, Janet was leading the detectives up a blind alley.
We went through the usual interview process. We cautioned her she was legally represented, and we asked her the initial question, what can you tell us about this offence, Janet, that you've been arrested for? And her answer was, I've no idea. I can't remember anything about it. I can't remember working at the town council. I can't remember being married. I can't remember my wedding day. I can't remember holidays. Anything that I can remember is only because people have told me it since my operation. I think my initial reaction was, well, this isn't going to be perhaps as straightforward as we originally anticipated.
It was the most bizarre interview that we'd ever had, I think, with Mrs. Cooper. We're talking to someone who has got no recollection whatsoever, and she can't see any of the documentation that we put to her.
But an even stranger twist in the tale was just around the corner.
Custody staff took Janet's fingerprints, and they actually took them before we started the interview. It was found that there was a criminal record for a female with those fingerprints but with a different name. And there was a record of the name of Janet Baldry and Janet Wright.
When we found out what Mrs. Cooper's previous convictions were and what she'd been doing previously, it was kind of a cathartic, shocking moment, and it altered the rest of the investigation.
In Essex, Tony Allery suspected that his new accountant, Stephen Ralph, was up to no good. With the help of his colleagues, Tony decided to take a closer look at his activities.
We did actually discover that he was actually on a few gambling sites. He just said that he clicked on it by mistake.
But a gambling habit wasn't the only concern Tony had about Stephen Ralph.
You would get a management account 1 month, and 2 months later that figure from the next lot of management accounts would change. And that was because he would come up and say that there was late invoices, which made the previous month's figures reduce.
We spoke to the chartered accountants and said, can you look into this because something is amiss? Which they did, and came back to us a couple of weeks later and said, well, if anything is going on with Mr. Ralph, we can't find it.
We couldn't prove anything. There was nothing cast iron to say that he was, but always in the back of my mind I had a suspicion.
To add to Tony's troubles, the recession had started to bite, and his company was losing work.
It wasn't a great time for everyone, but we were fine. You know, we were ticking by, but we'd noticed that, you know, we had an overdraft. It was getting bigger and bigger. And we didn't know where we were going wrong, to be honest.
We really had to downsize the business.
Tony was about to ask Stephen Ralph to stay on, but the accountant had other plans.
Stephen Ralph was given, along with the rest of the office staff, the option of moving. To be honest, I was glad when he said he wasn't going to, because I knew it was too far for him to go.
Little did Tony know that a bombshell was about to drop.
When Mr. Ralph gave one of the other directors the finances, the director told me that it was in a bit of a mess, with a completely different scenario to what Mr. Ralph had given me, that in the first 3 months, where Mr. Ralph, I think, had us down losing a little bit of money, he told me that it was in excess of £190,000 loss. You know, in previous years we might have lost 50 or 60,000, but to lose £190,000 in the first 3 months was just mind-blowing.
Without proof of wrongdoing, Stephen Ralph was allowed to quietly slip away. Tony was left with huge losses and had to make a drastic decision.
Actually, it was funny, I was in the kitchen. Tony asked the managers to come down, it was on a Sunday. And they were sitting at the table over there, and they were sitting chatting, and they just come to the conclusion that they just couldn't continue.
I couldn't carry on thinking that we'd lost that money, because if we'd lost that sort of money, we'd have to make up so much that I didn't think it was a point where we could get to.
20 years is just, all the work's just gone. He just worked so hard, and actually at the end of it for absolutely nothing. So that's what upsets me.
We couldn't tell any of the employees because they were all driving around the country in trucks. So basically what we told them on the Friday was everyone was to come to the new yard. When everyone got back, we broke the news.
Over 50 staff were in the firing line, including husband and father of two, Tom Richardson.
It was like somebody throwing a brick through my windscreen. Just couldn't believe it. The worry of going home and having to tell my wife the most upsetting news that I'm sorry, but I've lost my job. And it's the thing I'll never forget. For me to go out to work meant everything. I'm a proud man, and I'm the old-fashioned type. I believe that the man should go out and be able to go out to work and earn and provide for his family. But to be taken away in such a manner, it was devastating.
For Tony, the closure of the business meant an end to his life's work. The tragedy hit him hard.
I was concerned about Tony. He was very quiet. And it does affect your relationship. It consumed us, really.
I try not to dwell on it too much, because if you do, it gets you. Even there I try not to think about it. This is probably about one of the most difficult things I've done, so.
In Preston, Peter Sutton's business was on the line. Jobs had already been lost thanks to Kirsty Lane's staggering theft of nearly £250,000. Now, at long last, she was facing justice.
At the end of the court case, Kirsty was sentenced on the evidence that was put before her. She was given 20 months prison. And out of the £250,000 that she took from us, the final figure we saw from her, £8,500. It's all she's had to pay back.
Kirsty hadn't just splashed the cash on her wedding. It was revealed that she'd also been indulging her shopping obsession.
She was spending money on bizarre things. Again, this fixation with crystalled iPads and phone covers and key covers for her car. And it was just tad.
I think that she started stealing small and then going bigger because she just got comfy, she got greedy.
Although Peter managed to save the business, the legacy of Kirsty Lane wouldn't go away.
The biggest impact it had following discovery of what Kirsty had done was you start and look at everybody and you start to mistrust people, and you can't run a business and you can't be like that in business where you don't trust the people that work for you.
For Kathy, who was made redundant because of the company's losses, it was one of the toughest periods of her life.
It was a hard time for me and my husband, and it was a hard time for Pure as a company as well. You know, it hit their business hard. I was a casualty of that. I was one casualty of the situation, but yeah, I think we all felt betrayed by it.
For Peter and his team, the nightmare of the last 2 years is now a thing of the past.
Following sentencing, I think the business and the individuals involved in the business were probably very relieved. We could now draw a line in the sand. The business has moved on. And I think, in some ways, part of that is we've suffered the kind of betrayal that we've had. And I think everybody knows that to go forward, we just have to work really hard. And I think that's what we've done as an organisation. Kirsty's downfall was her own greed. If it had been a couple of transactions and a few thousand to her, nothing would have happened, nothing would have been noticed over the years. But to do it for such a long period of time, that's where she is today.
Janet Cooper had been arrested on suspicion of stealing almost £300,000 from her employer, Brierley Town Council. But the investigating detectives had made a startling discovery.
Janet had a history of convictions. The most recent one before we'd interviewed her was from 2003, where she'd stolen something like £1.2 million from a consultancy firm in Leicester, where she was working. But it also showed before that she'd stolen smaller amounts of money, but still substantial amounts. We're talking about tens of thousands of pounds from other firms that she'd worked for. She'd been committing fraud from a very early point in her life.
Janet was released on bail while the detectives pieced together the puzzle. They needed time to work out just how deep her deception went.
We decided to ask for copies of every cheque that Janet Cooper could potentially have written over a 3 or 4 year period, and we had to then start to compare money that had gone out of the town council's bank account with money that had gone into Janet Cooper's bank account and try and work out what had happened and how she'd done it.
Janet Cooper hadn't just stolen money, she'd also saddled the council with huge debts.
The parish council thought that everything Janet had done was through grants and funding, and now it transpires that she took out loans and forged their signatures on the loans.
Council assumed it was a grant, but it was a loan. Administration-wise, she was doing everything. It went into her pocket, basically.
To add insult to injury, these fraudulent loans would still have to be paid back by the local residents.
Our investigation revealed that Mrs. Cooper made in the region of £695,000 worth of fraudulent claims, and it would seem around £300,000 of that was transferred to her own bank accounts.
I would like to have strung her up at the nearest lamppost when I found out what she'd done. She was really hated in Granthorpe.
Unbelievably, Janet Cooper had even confessed to her previous crimes in a documentary on national television.
Because it's not money on the table, it's not real, it just figures. So it's not like counting money. But it was money then, wasn't it? Yeah, it's totally money.
I think, without a shadow of a doubt, she's the most complex character that I've ever investigated. She said that she'd bought a new car that hadn't been delivered because it dropped off the back of the ferry that was delivering it from Sweden. Some of the stories were absolutely astonishing. Things that she said, lies that she came out with, were sometimes based on some kind of fact. The fact that she said she was going to swim the channel. We spoke to her parents, and her mother is quite an accomplished swimmer. She said she was competing in the Commonwealth Games throwing the discus. Her father was a county-level discus thrower. Just absolutely bizarre behaviour. Almost as if she felt the need to either buy people's admiration or achieve their sympathy.
I think Janet is a compulsive liar. She's lied all of her life. I would suggest her lifestyle is just a fantasy.
Coming up, Essex entrepreneur Tony Allery discovers the truth about his suspicions.
I've never seen Tony. He was white, it was like a grey-white colour. And he just looked at me and I said, whatever's happened? And he said it was Stephen Ralph.
And the village of Brierley suffers the consequences of Janet Cooper's crimes.
We've lost everything. We've got nothing. She's ruined a lot of people's lives.
Tony Allery's business was in ruins. He'd always believed that Stephen Ralph, his former accountant, had in some way been responsible for the company's demise. But then, a year after the closure of the business, Tony received a phone call that confirmed all his suspicions.
In October 2010, I was driving into Colchester to pick up Julie and her mum, and my mobile rang, and I answered the phone, and the guy on the other end of the phone introduced himself as a police officer, and that one of my ex-employees had been arrested. And straight away I said to him, "Do you mean Stephen Ralph?" And I think his words were, "How do you know?" And I said, "Well, I've known him for a long time, but couldn't prove anything."
We come out of the station and he was standing there, and I've never seen Tony. He was white, it was like a grey-white colour. And he just looked at me and I said, whatever's happened? And he said it was Stephen Ralph. And sorry, he was very upset. And I sort of wasn't surprised, I was shocked. But my first thoughts were, as silly as this sounds, well, it's not your fault, so don't take this to heart anymore because you're not the cause of this, you know.
Incredibly, Stephen Ralph had been caught stealing money from another business in the area. The police investigation revealed he pocketed not only £120,000 from the pharmaceutical firm he'd been working for, but also £100,000 from Tony's business.
He would make up a fictitious invoice by using any sort of creditor that we'd used before. So on the bank statement, he would have the supplier's name, which could be anyone that he wanted to put in there, but he would just change the account number.
By transferring cash from the company's account and overpaying his credit card, Stephen Ralph was able to make withdrawals from his own balance and swipe tens of thousands of pounds.
This is a Freedom of Information which I did, which got me Stephen Ralph's credit card statement. In here is an amazing amount of figures that he'd stolen. March 2008, payment thank you, £1,500. 17th of April, 2,518.43. 7th of August 2008, £3,000. Refund credit card balance, £17,502.57. The last substantial one was he stole £15,275.64. That was on the 4th of October 2010, and they say that's the trigger for them catching him. I look at specific dates, like on my birthday, I think he nicked something like £8,000. It must have been like a birthday present to me, I think.
Sneaky swindler Stephen Ralph had been pocketing the profits to live the high life. As well as blowing the cash on home renovations, he'd used the proceeds to fund a serious gambling habit.
He could see the state Tony was in. He knew very well we were going under, and he just kept on and on and on. And that I find incredible.
At his trial, Stephen Ralph pleaded guilty to 2 separate counts of fraud and was sentenced to 5 years in prison.
Just seeing him in the dock was an ordeal. I'm a bit emotional anyway, but I was very, very upset. Tony was very, very upset.
And he was sitting there and I looked over to him. And it's something that I won't ever forget. As long as I'm alive, he looked up at me and I looked at him and he just smiled at me. That's pretty difficult to have someone do that to you after you know what you've done.
Tony and Julie had planned on an early retirement, but shameless fraudster Stephen Ralph has left their dreams in tatters.
Basically, I buy houses, refurb them and then sell them on. And in that process, I labour on the jobs, supply the tools, materials and get tradesmen in to do the work. Physically for myself, my back does play out quite a lot, but I just have to take the pills to keep the pain away.
I think years and years ago of like lifting trailers, hooking them onto the back of lorries and all the rest of it, it's taken its toll on his back. And, you know, any physical job, it's not good for him really. But he hasn't really got any